Your thoughts on the Stetson Bennett reaction that I got yesterday? I was a little surprised that somebody reached out and wanted to share that, but they did, and that's what they thought. Sense of entitlement is how he's viewed around the program.
It's funny. I did not see that from him initially, and it doesn't surprise me. You know who Stetson Bennett is now reminding me of? The more I hear about this, is AJ McCarron at Alabama. I don't know if do you remember how much AJ McCarron acted like he was a superstar above the team at Alabama?
Yes.
I remember him showing up his center in the national championship game for a bad snap just to kind of show himself up. I also remember after Alabama lost to Auburn on that kick six, AJ McCarron wasn't with the rest of his team. He went to go hug his mom, his grandmom, and his supermodel wife or girlfriend at the time. The one that Brent Merceberger was so obsessed with.
She's so good looking. That was the creepiest thing on television ever.
It really was. But AJ McCarron did that, and he carried himself like he was a Peyton Manning or Tom Brady type when everybody knew that you and I could have started at quarterback for those Alabama teams and won national championships. And I remember the year after AJ McCarron left, after Blake Sims lost his first game at Alabama. Keep in mind, Alabama never went undefeated with A.J. McCarron at quarterback. A.J. McCarron goes on a radio show and all but says they just don't have the leader like I was when I was at Alabama. And I just think that, Stetson Bennett is giving off those type of vibes. He's not as obnoxious. I think A.J. McCarron was the worst case of all time of being on third and thinking you hit a triple. But if what you tell me is true, Stetson Bennett seems to be giving off those same vibes. So we're going to have to see how that plays out going forward. Let's hope that, I don't really hope or care, but, I wonder if Stetson Bennett is going to take shots at Georgia next year if they don't win the national title and go off the vibe of, well, if I were there, we would have won another one.
Yeah, and you don't want to walk into an NFL locker room with a sense of entitlement. It's one thing to come in, and I'll tie this back to Nico, that I think he's come in with a sense of confidence, but not cockiness, not a sense of I step in, I'm going to start. He's from people I talk to that are within the program, just very impressive. I talked to somebody just recently that it was just they were really worried about. This person was worried in particular that he could come in and kind of be this cocky young man with all the attention he's gotten, but that hasn't been the case. You can walk into a locker room and be confident. You can walk into a locker room and even be cocky, but you don't want to walk into a locker room and say that, hey, this is my starting job because I'm the hot freshman in town. And you get the sense that with Stetson Bennett, he said, I'm the guy leading you to 2 national championships. No, he's really not. I mean, there are a lot of guys that could have done that. I just said the number 25. Do you think that's too high or too low of quarterbacks that could have stepped in there and won a couple of championships? And I don't say those sorts of things lightly. I'm not trying just to get a reaction from Georgia fans, but I believe that there are 25 guys that played college football last year that could have won a championship with that team.
Yeah, I think it's more because we're talking about 25 starters, I would assume, right, Dave? I mean, there were colleges that could go 2-3 deep at quarterback, and any of those quarterbacks could have started for Georgia last year and won a national title, or the year before. And you're right, you don't want to go in, particularly from high school to college is bad enough, but college to the NFL acting like that, the whole "don't you remember what I did in college?" Nobody cares in the NFL, and that's when you start to see. That's when you start to see those NFL players talking about how great they were in college and using it as kind of a leverage point to say they have credibility to say anything. Again, I harken back to A.J. McCarron. He took a shot at Nick Saban after he was riding the bench at Cincinnati because he wasn't really that good. And so he had to sneak in, don't you remember how great I was in college? Yeah, no one cared. And no one's going to care about that with Stetson Bennett either. And so look, I got to be honest. I didn't see this with Stetson Bennett. I thought Stetson Bennett was actually a well-grounded dude until about a week ago, honestly.
The first time it cropped up to me was actually the Tennessee game, and people were he was upset about people calling his phone and his cell phone and getting his cell phone number, and I get that, and he did the call me thing, but that was still early in the game. That's not the time to tried to be demonstrative about frustrations. And yeah, I thought that was a sense of cockiness. Now he backs it up. He's fantastic in the fourth quarter. He's been fantastic overall. And that to me is when, way back in the Tennessee game, it turned from here is a great story to, hey, man, this guy may be a little full of himself. That very moment is when it crossed my mind. Let me ask you this before we get Ryan Callahan on. Would he have started for Tennessee over the past couple of years, the Josh Heupel years? Would he have started if he's on the roster over Joe Milton last year or eventually Hendon Hooker this year? Would Stetson Bennett have been able to get a starting job at Tennessee?
No. And I say that saying I don't necessarily think that Stetson Bennett may not be a better quarterback than Hendon Hooker or Joe Milton. But I say that talking about Josh Heupel's system, I think one, you've got to be able to read a safety, so you need a little bit of height. You need a little bit of size playing quarterback in the system. And you've got to have a good deep ball. And even though Stetson Bennett may be more accurate than Hendon Hooker, which that's debatable, but I'd concede that point. I don't think he's got a better deep ball than Hendon Hooker, and he certainly can't throw it as far as Joe Milton. Do you think he can throw it as deep, has a deep ball like them?
No, and a great point about the height, to have a little bit more vision. Sometimes that's overhyped, but not in this case. I think you need to see over top. And the other thing about Stetson Bennett, if he has this attitude, that's a good thing to get on the field at Georgia. They didn't need anybody with an attitude at Tennessee. They didn't need any possible distractions. And if he steps in with an attitude and rubs some people the wrong way, we've seen the quarterback group rub people the wrong way, the way they were handled at Tennessee before, if you want to go back to 2005. So, I don't think he would have been a good fit. I don't think he would have started for Tennessee. I don't think he would have played for Tennessee. I don't think he would have been Josh Heupel's kind of player. Had he been on Pruitt's team when Heupel took over, I think he would have been one of those guys like Brian Moore, who was asked to exit stage left. I don't think he would have even been on the team to compete in the fall. If what I'm told yesterday, based off of our conversation, that he's entitled is true. Listen, there was no room for anybody to be entitled on this team. I don't care if you'd started 40 games coming into the season. This was a new approach, a new season, and sense of it. I mean, name one player that should have been – I'm trying to think of one player that just absolutely said, this is my starting job, and you really don't have a choice because you don't have another direction to go.
I mean, the only one who could have maybe said that would have been – we're going to talk about him later in the program, but Alontae Taylor in 2021 could have said that, and Darnell Wright could have said that too, because Darnell Wright was the only five-star caliber lineman. But to their credit, neither one of them did act that way. Darnell Wright really willingly sacrificed his draft stock for a year by moving to left tackle to help the team, which, I harken back to, here's a 05 story for you, Dave. Remember when the coaches wanted to force Jason Allen into safety, and he played it for 1 year, and then he said, I'm not coming back for my senior year unless you let me play cornerback?
Yes, I do remember that. Darnell Wright is a great example of a selfless player. And I was just talking about last year's team in particular. Darnell Wright probably could have said, I only want – or, you're right. He's a natural right tackle in the NFL. But left tackle is a little bit sexier. So he could have said, I want to stay at left tackle because that's a sexier position. Typically, those guys get drafted higher. At either point, he could have said, I prefer this position over the other and had Tennessee over a barrel. And he didn't choose to do so. What he chose to do was, hey, where do you need me? And that's commendable. But Darnell Wright's probably the one guy that could have thrown his weight around, pun intended, but he didn't choose to. And listen, maybe that's exactly what Georgia needed, was a guy that felt entitled, was a guy that felt cocky, was a guy that felt as if he were overlooked and tried to get benched on multiple occasions. But there's just a fine line when that goes too far. And I say this not for Georgia's sake. Good for you. You won 2 championships with him, and that's fantastic. I mean, you can't get any better than that. However, moving forward, if he does have this sense of entitlement, he didn't go to the Senior Bowl. Does he think he's just going to naturally slip into the first round? He's not. of the NFL draft. And yeah, if he goes into the NFL with a sense of entitlement, then he can take that sense of entitlement straight to the USFL.
Yeah, I'm going to be a little I'm going to be a psychologist for a minute, and I'm going to say sometimes the worst thing that can happen to somebody is when they constantly prove people wrong, because they start to think they're invincible when that happens. And so when anybody's telling them they shouldn't be a certain way, they don't listen, because they're like, I've already proved all these other people wrong, so why do I need to listen to you? I'm just going to transition into music for a minute, and I'm going to say, guys, that's what happened to Kanye West. Kanye West spent years proving everybody wrong in the music game, to the point that he felt he could do whatever he wanted because he had so constantly proven people wrong. So when people were saying, Kanye, don't do that, Kanye, don't say that, he's like, why do I need to listen to you? I've gotten this far not listening to anybody.